Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. It's a nice rainy Sunday afternoon, and I wanted to share some insights that came up during my self-inquiry meditation as of late, and they also go hand in hand with some of the questions that I've been getting during coaching sessions of people who are starting to practice self-inquiry and run into trouble because they don't know exactly what to do or where to point their attention. So this is not so much an instructional video, but it highlights one very important fact about self-inquiry. And it's a fact that you either arrive to as part of a long process of trying to find the sense of self, but you can also use it from the beginning to inform the practice of self-inquiry. The practice of self-inquiry is one in which, in essence, you turn the direction of your awareness towards trying to find out what you mean when you say I or when you say me. And it is a process in which you try to explore with your attention what your sense of self is made of. And this is important because throughout our lives, because of the way that our mind develops, we conduct ourselves from our sense of self. In other words, our egoic individuality is what we believe ourselves to be, and from there we interact with the world. And as I've explained in some videos in the past, this creates a mode of being or a mode of interaction in which we consider ourselves to be a subject and we consider the world to be an object by which we are surrounded. Now, through self-inquiry, if you follow the process of self-inquiry with enough dedication, what you essentially find out is that your sense of self is exactly that, nothing but a sense. Just as sight or hearing are senses, self is also just a sense as opposed to your actual identity. And this comes as quite a revelation, actually, because up until that point, as I said, you had been conducting yourself as if your sense of self was your identity. And through self-inquiry, you come to realize that the self is a sense, just as hearing is a sense, just as sight is a sense, just as the sense of being a physical body is a sense. And what you come to realize is that everything that arises in the mind is nothing but a sense. Every single perception that you have ever had, including your very sense of self, is nothing but a sense that arises in mind. And now, one step that can help in realizing this, which I'm about to describe, is very important because, see, when you start doing self-inquiry, you start doing it from your sense of self because you really have not much of a choice. When you start doing self-inquiry, you start doing it as an egoic individuality. You don't have much of a choice there, right? So from ego, you start this process and you start trying to find out what it is that you are. But all you're looking is being done from the egoic sense of self. So it's a little bit of a trap, right? You're in a bit of a trap that you can't really avoid. Now, you are only one step removed from escaping that trap. And that step is the one that I'm proposing in this video, which is, rather than looking for the sense of self, or rather than looking for what you mean when you say I, you could make a jump and simply sit in the realization that you are. In other words, to start getting a feel for the undeniable fact that you are. Right? This becomes very, very nuanced. It becomes very subtle, because the fact of your being seems to be quite lame, actually. It's like, so what, would say the mind, right? Like, how is this going to help me realize my real self, right? Like, the fact that I am is undeniable, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to carry much water, right? That's what the mind makes of it. And this is true. It doesn't carry much water, you know? The undeniable fact that you are is undeniable, but at the same time, there's no so what from there, except for one really, really important thing, which is the undeniable fact that you are contains the sense of self. And so that when you're doing self-inquiry, so long as you are doing it from the sense of self, you'll be on seeking mode, trying to find, what is it that I am? What is it that I am? What is it that I am? What it is that you are, what you're looking for, is the fact that you are. That's what you're looking for. Now, you could look until the cows come home and never find, because from the egoic sense of individuality, you can only ever look for what is it that you are, and you will never find. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no value in looking, because it is the process of looking that eventually lands you in the realization that what you're looking for is what you're looking from. And what you're looking from is the undeniable fact that you are. Okay? This is a very, very tricky, very nuanced realization. I'm trying to share it with you out of insight, but I have to use language to communicate that, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Now, if you simply rest in the fact that you are, that contains both the who and the rest of your senses and the world. So your sense of egoic individuality is contained in the fact that you are. Meaning, the fact that you are, if you rest simply in the fact that you are, you have gone meta. You have gone one step removed from the who, the sense of egoic individuality, and you have gone one up on it. And so from the bare fact of being, or rather, the bare fact of being contains both who you are and who you are not, which is the rest of your perceptions. Meaning that from that bare fact of being, you can finally reconcile your sense of self, or the subject, and your sense of a world that is out there, meaning the object. From egoic individuality, you can never become non-dual with the world, ever, because the egoic individuality is the separation of subject and object. So from there, no matter how much you try to unify with the world and become non-dual and get glimpses of the whole thing, you will always bounce back to subject-object, because the sense of self is the separation from the world. So the way to go meta on yourself, the way to go meta on egoic individuality, or the sense of I, is to simply rest in the bare fact that you are. And from that bare fact, you can observe both the sense of self and all the other senses that are projecting a world out there. So you've gone meta on your entire experience, or the entire experience of being you. And therefore, the experience of being you can become completely unified, so that the egoic sense of self can become unified, or can be seen as yet another element in mind together with the rest of the world. As I said, this is a rather nuanced type of instruction. The mind doesn't like simply resting in the bare fact of being, because there's not much to do there, and there's not much to realize or work with or anything really. And plus, resting in the bare sense of being, it kind of robs the mind of its sense of empowerment and of doing something or getting somewhere, because you already arrived. The bare sense of being is the arrival. In that sense, you could see, or you could elucidate that self-inquiry, or rather the fruition of the path of self-inquiry, is one in which you come to terms with the fact that sadhana, or that the path, is a pathless path, because you eventually get to a place in which you cease to depart from the fact of being. It's a fact from which you kept departing so that you could concretize yourself as a separate individuality that believes itself to have agency over a world, or over a reality that seems to be separate from it. Now, the ego doesn't really like this, because you essentially lose the egoic sense of agency that you had attributed to yourself. So the pathless path is a path of arrival to that which you've never really departed from, which is the bare sense of being. But the mind wants to constantly depart from the bare sense of being in order to attribute itself separate agency with which it can procure comfort, pleasure, and the rest of the things that it wants to play around with, at the cost of the fulfillment that comes from being once again tethered or anchored in pure beingness. That's what you sacrifice when you start playing around with doership, desire, craving, aversion, and all these things. So it takes a lot of training and a lot of eroding of your vasanas, or your mental tendencies, to dare do nothing. It's a hell of a jump. It's a hell of a sacrifice. It's the sacrifice of your individuality and your mistaken or misplaced sense of autonomy. But it is, you can taste an enormous amount of energy that starts to flow through the system, and you can taste that you are now really getting to grips with what this was all about, which was simply resting in the bare fact of being, which was, or is rather, the title of this video, and noticing how that has always been enough, that has always been the case, and it becomes obscured by movements of the mind that promise to get you somewhere better than that. And when you follow those, when you follow them enough, you come to realize that you're in a constant circle jerk, in a constant chasing, in a constant wild goose chase, or chasing a red herring, because the projections of the mind are simply projections in mind, by the mind, of the mind. And they include a spurious individual sense of self, which you can only see from a distance, or see as part of experience, when you rest as the bare fact of being, which is no different than pristine awareness. They're one and the same. So if you allow yourself to just be, as lame and uninteresting and unedifying as that might seem to be, that is the only place from which you can observe the individual sense of self as nothing but another datum of experience. And that will allow it to be seen for what it is, and unified with every other datum of experience, so that the sense of self is finally dethroned from the identity that it assigned itself, that it attributed to itself, having hijacked your real identity, which was only that of pure being or pure awareness, which are one and the same. Very, very advanced, extremely simple, and yet extremely advanced. You could dismiss this as completely lame, or you could be blown away by it equally. And both are nothing but a reflection of what you're ready to hear and where you are in the path of realization. And this insight is as fresh as they come. It's arisen for me in the past 24 hours. And the funny thing about it is I have heard and read this 1,000 times, but there is nothing like the power of actual insight arising and becoming real for you, right? So I hereby share it, I communicate it, and you'll say, oh yeah, I knew that, or you say, oh my God, and then forget about it. But it doesn't matter. It's fine, and it is all part and parcel of this really interesting process that unfolds and in which we are all engaged, hopefully. So I share it for whatever it's worth, and as usual, I'm really curious to hear your comments, so do share them in the comment section. And I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. If you think that this content is helpful to others, then your liking, sharing, and subscribing makes the channel far more available to everyone out there. It's very motivating to me. And I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Until then, cheerio, thanks for listening, and bye-bye.